Hello, once again, Charlotte Etchen here at Holly Hall. We're so happy to have you join us again for the second book review. Now, but in this age of new technology a real hoot, I do hope you enjoyed Holly Hall's first review as well with Rosemary Rumley. Wasn't she fun? Oh, she's so much fun to love from afar, even if she does live in Dallas. But wow, we have such a treat for you today. For the first time, we have an anonymous reviewer. Such mystery, such guessing. Oh, it certainly adds a little spice to our life, and we could use that nowadays, can't we? And who wouldn't want to be a duchess? Oh, I'd love to be a duchess. No more house cleaning, no more cooking, no more pulling weeds in the garden. Oh, I think it would be fabulous. But, I can see my husband of 60 years just rolling his eyes at that right now. But seriously, we have a duchess today with us, and I'm going to tell you more about her in just a moment. But first, I'd like for you to have our board member, Deborah Duncan, speak to you about some important thoughts and mentions. Deborah, welcome.
Oh, hi. Welcome to everybody, particularly my friends Jerry and my cousin Laurie from Austin, who are joining the Duchess today, and Charlotte as we talk about this fun, poignant book. I want to take a minute to thank all our underwriters and our ticket holders. You have provided such a wonderful financial support for us that you can assist in our subsidy program, where we help residents who maybe are hitting some financial bumps in their road, and we want to allow them some peace of mind that they can stay at Holly Hall and stay as residents at this beautiful place. So that's our subsidy program, and I really appreciate that you're taking part in making that possible. Charlotte.
Great. Now for our real treat. We're going to hear a review today about becoming Duchess Goldblatt. Now, the oil painting in the National Gallery of Art became our Duchess Goldblatt's Twitter avatar. Our Duchess imaginary duchy, as you call it, is just 10 minutes north of New York City and 10 minutes south of the Canadian border. Talk about rich territory. Wow. Now, according to Texas's favorite son, Lyle Lovett, one of the very few who actually know who our mysterious guest speaker is, the Duchess is an 81-year-old literary icon, bringing people together in her name, in bookstores, museums, concerts, coffee houses, and all along the way, she brings her friends home. Now, talk about epitome of happiness. Wow. Now, becoming Duchess Goldblatt is really two stories. The first one is about the reclusive, real-life writer who created a fictional character out of loneliness and thin air. And the second part, that of the magical Duchess Goldblatt herself, a bright light in the darkness of our social media today. Now, fans all around the world are drawn to the Grace's voice, her wit, her life-affirming love for all humanity, and the fun and friendship of the community that has sprung up all around her. So now we're going to enjoy hearing from our mysterious reviewer, and possibly we'll pick up a few hints on how to start a duchy of our own. Wouldn't that be fun? You never know. So in addition, there'll be some questions that we asked of the Duchess. So enjoy. And here we go.
Okay, well, thank you, Charlotte. That's really very interesting. So it's really my privilege to welcome our anonymous writer, our cultural sex pot, as she is self-described. Hi, Duchess, or Her Grace.
Good morning. Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you so much for that lovely welcome.
Well, tell us just a little bit. If somebody isn't on Twitter, and maybe somebody hasn't read your book yet, how do you invite them and get them interested in doing that?
Indeed, yes, it's a good question. And Deborah, as I was listening to Charlotte's lovely introduction, I was thinking, my gosh, this would be really hard for a person who is new to Twitter to wrap their head around. What the heck are we talking about? So I would be delighted to give a little background to make it a little more understandable, which is that, as you mentioned, I am a writer. I'm an anonymous writer who has put together this book. About 10 years ago, I had gone through a very difficult period in my life, a difficult divorce. I had lost a lot of my social circle that had been part of my husband's family, lost a lot of relatives. I was very lonely and looking for ways to connect with new people. But perhaps some people who are within the reach of my voice today will recognize that it's not easy for a woman who is no longer 22 years old to make friends when she finds herself at the end of a long marriage. It can be very difficult to meet new people and to make connections, particularly when you have a small child at home, as I did at that time. So I turned to social media, I turned to Twitter and invented this fictional character, Duchess Goldblatt, and began to have some fun with playing with a different voice, creating sort of an alter ego, if you will. Duchess Goldblatt could say things that I would never say. She could talk to lots of different people. She could engage with people on social media in a way that I, as a regular person, single mother, could not. So I started to use Twitter just as a way to have some fun in a very safe, cloaked way, if you will, using this avatar that you see before you, the portrait by Franz Hals that hangs in the National Gallery of Art, as Charlotte mentioned, and just having some fun and using some humor and making conversation with strangers online. That's the long and the short of it. Out of that came this book, but that was many years later. So maybe that gives a little bit of an explanation, Deborah?
Yes, it does. And it's very interesting because in all the reviews of your book, they speak to the fact that here is this depressed, lonely, sad lady and this glorious cultural icon, Duchess. So I think there's a real push-pull in this book about who do we like and who really is the heroine of our story. Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? Who's the one? I mean, is our anonymous writer going to be okay? And the Duchess just lightly go down the streets of Crooked Path singing Wagnerian opera?
Yes. You know, it's funny. I think all of those things are true at once, and this may resonate for other people too. You may have periods in your life when you're very depressed or sad or feeling deep grief at the loss of a loved one, deep grief at the loss, in my case, of a marriage. But you don't walk through life at all times with sorrow on your face and with tears upon your face. That may be a very internal grief that you're feeling. But what you present to the world, I think particularly true for women who are socialized to present to the world a cheerful countenance, may be quite different. So the two things were true at the same time. I was very, very sad and very lonely, but Duchess Goldblatt was a friend to everybody in the world and a cheerful voice and a fun voice and offering friendship to everyone who chose to interact with her on Twitter.
Great. Well, I know my two friends, Laurie and Jerry, that are here today are immense dog lovers. So would you mention perhaps the Duchess's, oh, wait a minute, she's called Duchess. Duchess's dog show?
Duchess, yes, indeed. Duchess Goldblatt has on Twitter what she calls the Duchess Goldblatt Dog Show. And for those who don't use Twitter all the time, and most people have vibrant lives outside of social media and perhaps do not spend as much time as I do on Twitter, it's just a place where people can write little snippets. You can engage with people that you don't know in a different way that you can't on Facebook. In Facebook, you're really only engaging with people you already know who are already part of your social circle. On Twitter, you can engage with anybody. So on Twitter, people who follow Duchess Goldblatt are encouraged to post pictures of their dogs, and she calls it her dog beauty pageant. And it has become sort of a popular thing. We do it about once a year, and everyone posts pictures of their dogs. And it's just, I don't know, it's just fun. Who doesn't love to show pictures of their dogs? So that is the Duchess Goldblatt Dog Show. We just did it about, I don't know, a month ago, I think. And Duchess should have soon her Duchess Goldblatt Cat Show. That was scheduled to happen sometime in October, but I think she forgot. So that may be happening now in November. But same idea. It's just a pet beauty pageant. So it's fun. There are no winners. Everybody who attends is a winner because we all enjoy looking at pictures of each other's dogs and cats. So that's that. It's just fun.
It's just fun. It's just fun. Charlotte, you had some questions that some of our residents had wanted to ask.
Well, some of our Holly Home residents have read your books and have some questions. And the first one says, you own everything that happened to you. Now, in telling your stories, people wanted you to write warmly about them. If so, they should have behaved better. What's your take on that quote?
Oh, yes, indeed. I know that quote. That came, I think, from Anne Lamott, the wonderful writer of a book called Bird by Bird, which is a guide to writing. And she also wrote a book called Operating Instructions, which is a very charming story of her first year as a new mother. If people haven't read that, they might enjoy that one by Anne Lamott. So I think there is I think what she's speaking to there when she says, if people wanted me to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. There's a burden that a writer carries to tell their own story as truthfully as they can, I think, especially in terms of the emotional truth of their own story, in a way that doesn't hurt other people. And so I think when she says people should have behaved better, she's saying in a joking way that the truth of her story may force her to tell other people's bad behavior. This was a very difficult thing for me in writing a memoir because there have been a lot of people around me throughout my lifetime who have behaved badly. Yes. But I thought it was very important to me to tell my story in a way that was authentic and true and generous without hurting anybody else in the process, even if they've passed away many years ago. So there are people in my book that I write about, people in my family who have been dead for many, many years, but I still feel a responsibility to not write about them in a way that would have hurt them. Because of course, in my mind, they're still very much with me. That's a long-winded answer to a very simple question, but I hope I sort of got at some of the truth of that.
Well, that's very compassionate. Here's another question. This person lives in Houston, about 40 miles from Klein, Texas. She's curious to know how you heard about Lyle Lovett's music and why you felt drawn to it.
Yes, well, I love Lyle Lovett, and Duchess Goldblatt loves Lyle Lovett to such an extent that when Duchess was first born, I placed her as her hometown in Klein, Texas. And that was my little shout out to the universe to say, Lyle Lovett, I love you. Not that I had ever had any thought that I might meet him or interact with him in any way. So it was a funny thing some years later when we did cross paths on social media and later become acquainted with one another in real life. When I first heard his music, I don't remember the first time I heard his music. I remember the first time I saw him perform live. It was 1991. It was a beautiful old theater. And if you know Lyle Lovett, as I'm sure many do, and you follow him on Instagram, and you've seen his beautiful pictures of the wonderful theaters around the United States where he has performed, you can picture that it was just an absolutely electrifying performance. And I just fell in love with his voice and his grace on stage, his persona as a performer. He is a generous and kind musician and performer. He's generous with audiences. And I was just I remember being so struck and thinking, who is this person who seems so deep and so loving with an audience? There were probably 3,000 people there, and he was just so kind and so gracious. And I just thought, this person is really something special. So that was 1991. I do remember it very clearly. And I'm probably dating myself here, going back a few years.
Well, a lot of us were doing things in 1991, and that's okay. But the interesting part of that is Lyle Lovett, the famous one, is now following you. I mean,
Yeah.
he seems to have the same passion for you and your story that he, that he can convey in his music. So his
Indeed.
knowing you is quite an adventure too.
It is. It's just one of those funny things that you can't explain. There is no reason for Lyle Lovett to know me or know who I am, but somehow we stumbled across each other. Well, I know how we stumbled across each other. I was following him on Twitter, and when I say I mean Duchess Goldblatt. He saw this character and said, "What the heck is this? I have to know about. I'm intrigued by this face. I'm intrigued by the name. What is this?" And so he started following Duchess Goldblatt back and was drawn to her humor, but also has told me he was drawn to the way that she extends a hand in friendship to everyone who talks to her on Twitter. And over time, over some months, this was 2013, over some months, he started sending direct messages, private messages to Duchess Goldblatt saying, "Listen, I don't know who the heck you are, but I love your humor. If you ever want to come to one of my shows, I'd love to meet you." And that was the beginning of what has become a real friendship. We did meet, and we have remained friends. So that's one of the great joys and privileges of my life. Really, has been to get to know Lyle Lovett.
Well,
Right.
I think so. I'm sorry, Charlotte, but I'm going to ask, when you talk about Lyle Lovett kind of connected with Duchess and then with you, I was very curious about the mention of the other authors in your book. Let's see, Laura Littman, Alexander Chee, Elizabeth McCracken Smith, and that funny quote by Duchess, who said, that authors are fun at parties, but they'll steal little parts of you. Do you think these authors are stealing little parts of you now, or do you have a good relationship with them?
Oh my gosh, I am honored to have a beautiful relationship with all of the wonderful authors that you mentioned and with others. I would be tickled to pieces if any of them took anything that I had to say and wanted to borrow from it or steal it. I would be honored and delighted. I don't think so. All of those authors that you mentioned are very established in their own rights, and they're great artists, and they have no need to take anything from me. I have heard sometimes from people, not published authors necessarily, but people who are striving to be writers or people who write in their own private way, not necessarily for publication, who have said that something Duchess wrote spoke to their hearts, and they have either written it down and refer to it frequently, or they use it as a jumping off point for some part of their own writing. And that's a great compliment, I think. I'm so honored when anyone tells me that I've written something that meant something to them and it gave them anything in their life that they could use. That's a beautiful compliment to me. And I don't look at any of that as stealing in any way. I look at it as this is an exchange of ideas. And I'm delighted that anyone's listening, really.
Great.
Well, one more question from a Holly Hall resident, Duchess, and that is, what is one of your favorite tweets?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I have one here that I like a lot. This is from Duchess a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. "I try to keep my abiding love for all humanity in one place, but somehow it always ends up in piles on the dining room table." I hope you can hear what I said. I know I have a New York accent that my father always said was the most beautiful accent in all of the United States. But I know for people in Texas, it might be a little hard to understand, especially because I speak kind of rapidly. But that one I liked a lot because I think it's true. I do have good intentions of having abiding love for all humanity, but somehow life interferes with all my good intentions, and it can be very difficult to maintain that love for our fellow man when we have to actually interact with people. And that's what I meant by it ending up in piles on the dining room table. You have these good intentions, and then you try to carry them forth in action throughout life, and it's not as easy. It's not as easy for a real person, I guess, as it is for a fictional character.
Yes, but they piled on the dining room table, and the dining room table is like this image of family. So maybe that's how that tweet works.
Yes, yes. No, I think you're right. There's a hominess to it and a familiarity. Lots of us pile things up on the dining room table even when we don't mean to. So yes, no, I think you're absolutely right, Deborah.
Okay, well, Her Grace also has written, supposedly, her own book called Family Memoir, An Axe to Grind. And I'm thinking we need to hear something about Her Grace's family, besides Hacienda, who we know is safely set apart. Tell us what we know or you are imagining about Her Grace's family.
Yes, indeed. So what we know about Her Grace's family, Her Grace, as you said, is 81 years old. She has one daughter named Hacienda, who is in a Mexican prison, serving several consecutive life sentences for her many crimes against humanity. And sometimes when Duchess mentions Hacienda, people will chime in and say, oh, Duchess, certainly she'll be freed someday. Certainly she'll get out of prison. She will never get out of prison. She is guilty of the crimes for which she has been convicted. She is a master criminal. And Duchess needs Hacienda to stay in prison so that she doesn't detract from any of Duchess's limelight. Duchess will not share the stage with Hacienda or anyone else. She likes to be the focus of attention. That's why Hacienda's in prison. But I also thought it was kind of funny that Duchess, who talks a lot about being a friend to all humanity and nurturing an evergreen love for all people, has a daughter who's a master criminal and needs to be in prison. That mother-daughter relationship to me is sort of funny. So we know about Hacienda. We know that Duchess's first husband, whose name was Mortiz, has died. After Mortiz died, she had several other husbands who never get named, but they were ex-husbands. So she married and divorced several times after Mortiz. And since then, she's had lots of boyfriends and romances and so on. She's a woman of the world, so she likes to get around and date. That's what we know for sure about Duchess. Everything else is innuendo.
And I bet she likes it that way, doesn't she?
She sure does. She sure does.
So your darling son was just such a little boy in the book, Becoming Duchess Goldblatt. And I love when he said he was passcoding you to keep you safe. So how is he doing now?
Yes. Oh, you're sweet to remember him. Thank you. So you're referring now not to Duchess, the character, and her daughter Hacienda, who is of course fictional, but myself as a real person writing this character. In real life, I have a son. And when he was little, as you mentioned, for those who haven't read the book, when he was little, he passcoded me, which meant he assigned to me a number, and he would say that number over and over and over again. And it was, in his mind, a way of keeping me safe. He was trying to keep me safe. He's older now, and he no longer feels the need to be as protective of his mother as he did when he was a little boy. He knows now that I'm quite a strong person and that I'm going to be fine and that I'm going to be okay. So he's a wonderful boy, not yet fully grown, still a boy, but a continual delight to me. He's doing great and brings great joy to my life. So thank you for asking.
Well, I'm glad. As they get older, sometimes they just get to be big boys, but that's okay too, isn't it?
Yes, and this one, I can tell he's a mama's boy. He will always be a mama's boy, and I have raised him to be so, and that's absolutely fine with me. We're very close. I say that jokingly. We're very close, and he's just a really good kid. So thank you.
Well, that brings me to a reflection of, son and daughter, reflecting on daughter and father. And I think your father, you've done an amazing job in honoring your father.
Thank you.
And I love the way you kind of came full circle in the parable of the prodigal son in understanding your father's love. I was very impressed with that.
Thank you. It was very important to me to tell the story of my father in a way that was true. In some ways, I think this book is a love letter to my dad. He was such a wonderful dad, not just to me, and I was an easy kid, but to my late brother, who did struggle with alcoholism and mental illness, depression throughout his life. Mm-hmm. He was such a great dad to my brother and was always encouraging, always loving to him, endlessly compassionate, and always urged me to find greater compassion for other people, people who were struggling, people who were suffering. And he just had endless amounts of compassion and forgiveness for other people, which I struggle with still to this day. It was something that my father had mastered, and something that I do struggle with. So it touches my heart, Deborah, to hear that you love the stories about my dad, because he was clearly, obviously, the central person in my life. I adored him. I still miss him. And he's been gone for almost 30 years now. So it's really nice to hear that he remains alive in our thoughts and in our conversation.
Well, Duchess tweeted about that too, about how memory works.
Yes.
I don't think I wrote it.
I don't remember. Remind me, Deborah, what did she say? She says a lot of things.
Well, she does say a lot of things. I'll find it because I wrote it down, because it really meant a lot. I've had some loss this year myself, and just that overwhelming loss, and then just things, the way memory comes back to you in these beautiful pieces is really what Duchess had.
Yes. So I think I do remember. Was it something along the lines of when you lose someone, you lose them in pieces, but you also get them back in pieces over time?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. So I think that's really true. You know, when you suffer a loss of a death, for instance, someone that you love has died, they don't disappear immediately. They still linger. They're still present in your mind. And it takes such a long time to accept that they're really gone. Right. And you keep thinking they're going to call. You keep thinking, oh, he'll walk through the door any minute now. And you have to learn over and over again. That's what I meant by losing people in pieces. That loss keeps coming back at you over and over again. Less so over time, of course, but then the grief softens, doesn't it? And you start to have that person come back to you through your memories and through the things that he loved. And so you get them back in little pieces over time too. And I think I think she said something like that you lose people in pieces, but when that love is very deep, they are not really gone forever, in the sense that relationship remains, that love remains, and hopefully continues to nurture you as you go on through life without them.
Well, I think that's recognition of that has been your healing process from where you began in the book to where you ended in your book. You know, the piece of your father that always said, reminded you that when you are writing, that is the best version of you.
Yes.
I thought that was a beautiful way to put that.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you here's a little tidbit about my dad that you'll enjoy. Particularly anybody who might be listening who had a great relationship with their dad. And I think we hear in our culture a lot about fathers who are disappointments, but we don't often get to celebrate fathers who are really wonderful to their children and really loving to their children. So I'll tell you a little snippet about my dad. He never, ever in his life admitted that there was ever a girl who was prettier than I was. And he just always insisted I was the prettiest girl that ever was. And when we got towards the end of his life, I think I was about 19 years old. And I said, you know, Dad, you've always encouraged me and you've always done such a great job, but you can admit now that I'm grown that there might be a woman in the world who's more beautiful than I am. And he said, no, absolutely. If there was ever any woman more beautiful than you, of course I would admit that. I would not deny it. And I said, oh, and he said, you show me the girl who's prettier than you and I will admit it. So I said, okay, Michelle Pfeiffer. And he said, oh, honey, she doesn't have your features. I mean, that was his way of saying, I mean, he just would not admit. And because, of course, in his mind, who could be more beautiful than the person that he loves? And also, it didn't hurt that I look like his mother. So, you know, this is not an objective assessment of what I actually look like. It just was, you know, a way to describe to you how encouraging he always was and how he always saw the best in every person. Maybe not Michelle Pfeiffer, but certainly in his kids. He absolutely did. He absolutely did. So thank you for indulging me and letting me share that story.
Well, he remains that balm for you.
Yes.
You mentioned the balm several times in the book, and
Yes.
he remains that for you, doesn't he?
Yes, the memory of him is a balm. Absolutely. You know, we are going through some very difficult times right now as a country, and when I call to mind, what would Dad have thought of this? What would Dad have thought of that? I'm reminded by his presence, which was a calming presence and a peaceful presence, and it does continue to give me, you know, a calming feeling when I remember him and how he was. Yes, absolutely.
Well, that brings up a question that our friend Laurie had about these troubling times. Laurie, do you want to ask our author, or maybe Duchess, about the troubling times?
Well, I'll be happy to. And Duchess, it's such a thrill for me to speak with you directly. I am a follower on Twitter, and
God love you, Laurie.
I'm the one whose dog ripped up the cover of your book. In fact, she's right here. I have taken her to therapy, and I have bought many more copies. Some of them are circling the neighborhood right now. And Callie is very contrite about ripping up the cover of your book.
Well, as she should be.
Yes,
She should
I agree
be. Thank you for that. I forgive Callie.
Well, thank you. I'm glad, and Callie's grateful for that. We have had many discussions, but I did want to ask you. Okay, I have heard that the year 2020 is going to be the future catchphrase of everything that could go wrong did. What do you think about that? And what would you say about what you and or Duchess and perhaps even Hacienda have learned about 2020?
That's Lori, you've asked quite a difficult question. There's a lot there.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So the challenge for me in answering that question is that Duchess lives in a fictional utopia. Crooked Path is a fictional utopia. There is no pandemic. There is no illness. There are no elections. Fictional people are not allowed to vote. People get along, and the town is run by librarians, and it's a beautiful place. So Duchess has different concerns than you and I might have, living in reality as we do, and where there is illness and there is sadness and worry. And so Duchess sees things differently than I do. So Duchess would say something like, the year 2020 has taught her that there are only more friends to pull into her circle, and it has encouraged her to see that everyone in the world is worthy of love. Duchess would say something like that. What I would say is it remains very difficult for me to, how can I say this, Lori? The struggles of life that were with me 10 years ago remain with me. It's still difficult for me to try to be a really good person when I see so much around me that I don't like. When I see so much around me that I don't agree with, or that it, to my mind, is wrong-headed or is headed in the wrong direction, and I want to fight against that. And Duchess would tell you and me and Hacienda to be at peace and to continue doing the work that we know we need to be doing to create God's heaven here on earth. That's what Duchess would say. And I would say, how? How am I supposed to do that? I don't know how to do that. And so that tension between the two of us, both of us existing in one mind, you know, I haven't quite resolved that yet, Lori, but I'm working on it. And I hope that if I'm doing anything with Duchess, what I'm doing is sort of wrestling with those questions myself, but doing so in a way that other people can find some sort of solace or comfort or relief from the worries of the day, which I know are serious worries of the day. Does that sort of make sense? I don't know, Lori. I don't know. That just has all the answers, but I don't.
Boy, do I get that. And
Yeah.
I may just add that more than anything, it's taught me personally that happiness is a choice.
Mm.
You know, it's a no matter what kind of situation. And I will also say, as I'm sure you've realized, and we all have, and especially Duchess, that the older we get, the braver we are to point out what is wrong and do something about it ourselves.
Yes. Oh, isn't
I
that
love
the truth?
that part about getting older. I really don't care.
Yes.
You
No,
know,
that's
when
very
somebody's
true.
doing something stupid, I really don't care about pointing it out. You know, bad behavior is bad behavior at any age.
Yes.
And Duchess has kind of inspired me to point out bad behavior and suggest corrections.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah, I did it the other day. It was kind of fun.
That's liberating. Well, I'm glad to hear that, especially because, I think you've hit on something very true there, Lori, that as we get older, there are benefits to aging, right? And one of the benefits is increased bravery. And when you say not caring, I think what you mean is not caring about what other people might want you to do or want you to be or want you to say, right? And there is a relief that comes from saying, I know who I am, and I know the strengths that I have to bring to the table, and I recognize truth when I see it, and I'm going to use my voice in a way that benefits the world around me. And that is a form of bravery, isn't it? So good for you. That's great. We need more role models of women who are aging happily and stepping into their power and able to say, I see benefits to being the age that I am. I'm smarter and stronger and braver than I was 20 years ago. That's, we need those role models around us.
Yes.
Enough with the Kardashians, right? We need some we need some more Duchess Goldblatts around us.
Oh, I agree completely. I agree completely. And it strikes me that as you discussed Hacienda, I would love to have a daughter like that. But I wonder if she's sort of the, I won't say dark angel on your shoulder, but at least the more mischievous one. Is that something that you would agree with? How do you see Hacienda?
Absolutely. No, I think you're exactly right. Hacienda is, she's kind of an agent of chaos, and she's down there in prison. She's always trying to break out. She sometimes hits up Duchess's followers. Supposedly, she doesn't really do this, but supposedly she hits them up for, donations to her bomb building classes and so on that she wants to take there in the prison. And Duchess always says, please don't send Hacienda money. Please don't contribute to Hacienda's, Girl Scout troop or whatever. I think the way that you said it is really well put. She is, how did you say it? A dark angel on Duchess's shoulder? I think that's right.
Yeah, or at least a dark gray.
Yeah.
Angel.
No, I think that, yes, absolutely she is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People do tell me sometimes they want to hear more from Hacienda. I should do more with Hacienda. We don't hear from her enough, perhaps.
Well, she sounds like a brave one. So that's why I'm kind of drawn to her, being brave and mischievous. And
she's a pistol. She's a pistol. I'll tell you what.
She is. She is. And I love that. As I say, as I grow older, I really enjoy things like that.
Yes. Yes.
I did have a couple of other questions very quickly. What kind of reading would Duchess encourage? What sort of books does Duchess like to read?
Duchess would probably say that she likes to read the books by the great spiritual leaders so that she can correct them and send her corrections back to the authors with with improvements that she'd like to correct, that she'd like to offer.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Why not? I try not to be too prescriptive because I tend to think people should read what they need to read. And sometimes in literary circles, maybe you agree with this, Lori, there can be a sense that everybody should be reading the same book, or there are certain books that are worth reading and good to read, and those are the books that are worthy, and other books are just trash or beach reads or not worthy or not, and to me, you read the books you want to read that nourish you, that give you the stories that you need, and it may not be someone else's cup of tea, but that's fine. Read the books you want to read. So I try not to tell people what books they should be reading. I can tell you what I'm reading right now, which is a book called Lady Bird Collected, and it was written by the owner of the Lady Bird Diner in Lawrence, Kansas. It's a collection of essays. She runs this diner in Kansas, and during the pandemic, she has turned it into not a diner that's serving people in the way we used to before the pandemic, but she's giving food away to people who are hungry and in need. And this book of little essays is her thoughts on love and community and friendship and service, being a servant-minded leader, and how she is at work in the world trying to improve her community. So I've really been enjoying that, and I believe it's offered as a fundraiser for the work that she's doing, feeding the hungry in Lawrence, Kansas. So I've been enjoying that.
And she is a real person, correct?
Yes. Unlike myself, she is a real person. Her name's
not a resident of Crooked Path.
No, my gosh, no, she's real. And she was featured recently on, I'm going to get the name of the show wrong. She was featured recently, I want to say on CBS News, as being I think they called her a pandemic hero, one of the people who has adapted to our new circumstances in a really beautiful way, and has answered the call of her neighbors and friends who need a hand right now. So.
And she makes pies? Is she the one that?
Yes, indeed. She makes the pies, and I've seen the pictures, and Lyle Levin has told me he's visited the Lady Bird Diner there in Kansas. The food is supposed to be really wonderful, so I had hoped at some point I could get to Kansas and experience it myself. And Kansas is kind of far from New York, so I'm not sure when I'll get there, but I hope someday to meet her and to get out there.
Yeah. And my final question that seems to pop up quite a bit, do you have a favorite wine?
I do. I have many favorite wines. It's funny. Duchess talks a lot about drinking Riesling, and I do like a Riesling. I'm gonna forget the name. What is the name? Something I discovered recently. Duchess will mention it soon, so that when I remember the name, I'll put it out there and you can have her recommendation, which is actually my recommendation. I do like a Riesling. I've tried to back off a little bit from Duchess mentioning alcohol quite as much, because I think sometimes she talks about drinking alcohol so much that it looks like she's endorsing a lot of alcohol drinking. I actually drink very little. Most of the time when she says she's having a glass of wine, I am actually not drinking any kind of alcohol. So knowing that people read her carefully, sometimes I try to be a little bit cautious about what she says. Not too cautious, as you've noticed, but a little bit cautious. And sometimes I worry too much that it looks like she's, I don't know. Maybe I worry too much, Lori. Endorsing something I don't really mean to endorse, or telling people they should be drinking a lot of alcohol when I don't really mean that, and she's just trying to be funny. But I do like a Riesling every now and then.
Okay. You mentioned that. That's good. Thank you so much, Lori, for some good questions.
Yes, thank you, Lori.
You're very welcome, and thank you, Anonymous, and thank you, Duchess. You've been a big inspiration to me, and I appreciate it very, very much.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. So Anonymous, I guess I'll call you that. It sounds so funny.
I know.
Hey, Anonymous. But one book reviewer mentioned that this Becoming Duchess Goldblatt was a collaborative performance art. Are you working on your next collaborative performance art?
So other people have called it that it's collaborative. And I think what they mean is that it's collaborative in the sense that people on Twitter, like Lori, will engage with Duchess in real time in view of others. We'll have a conversation together and talk about dogs or Riesling or whatever else, pie. And in that way, we're all participating in this art form as it unfolds. I don't necessarily see it as collaborative because to my mind, it's just happening inside my mind. So I can't see any of the other people who are alive in the world. To me, it's all sort of fictional. Do you know what I mean? Lori exists for me right now because I can see her and I can hear her voice and I know that she's real and she's waving at me, and that becomes quite real. But most of the time, it's all happening inside my head, and it doesn't, it feels like fiction. I worry that makes absolutely no sense to anyone but me, and that's okay. But you see what I mean? To me, it's not like, I think of collaborative as we're standing in a room together and we're doing something together, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. And this is more, I guess we're pretending together. So it is collaborative. But to answer your question, I don't know what I'm doing next. I have no idea. I don't know what I'm having for dinner tonight. I don't know.
Well, thank you. And that was some of the dilemma I had reading the book, trying to remember that everything in the book was past tense. But as I was reading it, it seemed like it was unfolding in front of me. So it was kind of this dilemma all the time.
Yes.
You know, and that was probably the only time I've ever seen that in a book, and I thought it was brilliant. I like that dilemma, so to speak.
Thank you.
Do we have some other questions?
I have a lot of questions. I don't know if you all have questions for me. I've got lots of questions in life that you could all give me some wisdom, but I don't know if you have other questions. You have other questions for me. You may not. You may say, my gosh, let's get this woman off the phone and get back to something that makes a little bit more sense.
It's been so pleasant to visit with you.
Oh, you're very kind.
We've got the money, we've got the time.
Well,
Unmute, Ms. Jerry.
I just wanted to suggest that, you know, as you said earlier, it's been a really, really, really tough year for a lot of people. And I have a daughter who became, I guess, locked into the Twitterverse. And it's been very difficult for me to understand. But one of the things I really appreciated is, I'm going to read it, how you have recontextualized Twitter as a therapeutic exercise, spreading unadulterated joy. I thank you for that. It's been really difficult, and I've finally extricated my daughter from that Twitterverse, or she extricated herself. But I can see how one could get so bogged down in this dilemma that we've been facing and will continue to face. But I just want to thank you for the joy you're bringing to people via something that can be so dangerous.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that. I think I know what you mean when you say that she was stuck in the Twitterverse.
Right.
And for those who don't use Twitter or might not know what you mean, it can be very addictive to put something out on Twitter, wait to get responses. You get immediate feedback from other people who engage with you, and people can spend hours and hours in Twitter getting into conversations with strangers. And some of them, as you say, can be very, very toxic. There's a lot of toxic conversation happening that can be very damaging to people's sense of well-being. I think it can detract from real life relationships. If you're spending a lot of time on social media engaging with strangers and not spending time with your own real life friends and family around you, that can be quite damaging. And it can be a very dark place. And it's, so I'm glad that you see a positive aspect to it, Jerry. I sometimes do worry that by continuing to be Duchess Goldblatt on Twitter, I'm encouraging people to stay there when otherwise they might leave and go do something more healing or more productive or more enjoyable for themselves. And so what Duchess encourages people to do is mute everybody else in the world except Duchess Goldblatt. Only listen to Duchess Goldblatt. I'm only half joking when I say that, because there is a lot that you have to close your eyes to in order to maintain sort of a healthy balance with it. It can be a lot of fun, but as you say, it can be really damaging to people. So I'm glad that your daughter has extricated herself from the dark side of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Deborah, what do you think?
Oh, I've just enjoyed this hour so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can recall Laurie telling me to watch the Book People, the bookstore from Austin's interview with Lyle Lovett and you. And I was so charmed that evening, and I immediately emailed, and now I've had another wonderful time with you. So I thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, this has been my delight and my privilege, and I thank you all for having me, and thank you to everybody who is supporting Hope Hall. You know, supporting our seniors is so important right now, and for, as we've said, so many people this year are having hard times, and so I'm grateful to everybody who is stepping up and taking care of their community, and you know, being part of helping someone else get through this year just as well as we can. So I'm grateful to everybody, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And thank you, Duchess. We sincerely just thank you so much for your time. And I'm all ready to set up my duchy, where I don't know where, but I'm ready to set one up. And we sincerely hope that you and all our friends that joined us today will have a happy holiday season. And join us again on February 18th for our reviewer, Ann Wiesbarger, who then will review another wonderful book for us. But until then, please stay safe, stay well, and stay prosperous. Whatever that word is.
Prosperous. Well said. Thank you, Charlotte. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
I'll
you.
say bye-bye.
Thanks, Duchess.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Loved it.